Hello, friends, and welcome to the Interworld podcast, where we explore the intersection of personal and collective transformation. My name is Yasha S. Wagner, and I'm a PhD researcher in the field of psychology, well-being, and spirituality, as well as a founder of the Interworld Institute for Inner World Peace. You can learn more about our nonprofit initiatives by going to interworld.org. Today, I have the great pleasure and honor of interviewing a longtime friend, a mentor, and an inspiration, Roman Hanis. Roman is now an international best-selling author. His recent book, Beyond Ayahuasca, actually reached the #1 top best-selling spot internationally on Amazon in the shamanism category in the United States, in Canada, in France, in Australia, and #2 in the UK. So really, really inspiring, really happy, and can't congratulate Roman enough on this big success that's happening right now with his book. Roman is also a co-founder of the Paititi Institute for the preservation of ecology and indigenous cultures. So I actually lived at the Larapata Center of the Paititi Institute when I was a teenager for about 9 months and learned so much from Roman, received a lot of guidance and instruction. So I'm really grateful to Roman, both as a friend and a teacher on the path. And I just want to say that I'm really happy to be doing this interview and to still be friends because Roman's known me since I was about 16 years old. So it's been a journey. And lastly, I just want to mention that Roman is also featured in the critically acclaimed and award-winning documentary Sacred Science. So if you'd like to learn more about Roman and his work, just stay tuned for this conversation and we'll go from there. So thank you. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Roman Hanis. Hey, brother, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Yasha. Thank you for welcoming me. It's great to be here with you and reconnecting throughout the years. It's been very inspiring to witness your evolutionary journey from a troubled teenager to a PhD research scientist and doing so many things in the community in Colorado. And it's beautiful to see you weaving the wisdom of the world for the inner peace.
Thank you. Yeah, that means a lot. So, there's a lot that we've both gone through since we last saw each other. And I'll just mention at the beginning, maybe we'll come back to this at the end of the conversation, but we're looking at reconnecting in person as well. So we've hosted Roman once in Colorado at a previous center for a breathwork retreat. And it looks like possibly this October, we might have Roman in Colorado again for a parents and children's workshop with Roman's children's book and some breathwork practices. So we'll share more about that later. But if you want to say any words about those workshops and your upcoming tour, feel free.
Well, the workshops are part of the eco-socio-emotional curriculum that we developed alongside with the elders of the Yagua tribe in the Amazon rainforest, as well as being guided to create a deeper connection with the eco-socio-emotional intelligence through the Amazonian and Andean cultures, as well with our Andean elders from the Kero Nation. And this booklet, I have it right here. It's a little booklet for children. It's called The Seed of the Heart. And it teaches children that just like the seed necessitates all of the elements of life, such as the water, the sunshine, the air, and the earth, our heart also necessitates all of the emotions to develop and grow healthy, mature, and spread wide. And it teaches children to open up to the emotions, to not be afraid of them, to navigate the emotions in their lives. The book is also supporting the Yagua Nation. So the Yagua tribe, they can share their heritage. You can see that the Yagua children here are on the cover and throughout the book. And so this book is also supporting the emergency health fund for the Yagua children and also the education fund. And so it's available in the tribe and also throughout our workshops, where we share about our work with development of the ancestral school for the Yagua tribe, children, for them to carry their ancestral heritage forward in the world where often they it's very hard for them to do it. There's so many factors and distractions, and so something to empower the indigenous soul of the planet, and also to awaken that within each one of us. The workshop will also, it's a parent-children workshop, so it helps to create deeper emotional bonds between parents and children and spend quality time and have this shared ground of emotional experiences of life and how we can navigate them.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love it. So, just so we're clear and so people understand, this is a children's book, but Roman is also an author of this best-selling Beyond Ayahuasca book that was pretty recently published and is now available for order online. And Roman reached out to me a while back about through our organization helping publish the book, and I started to read the manuscript. But then Roman was able to get it published through Hay House, which I believe is an imprint of. Is it? What's the imprint?
Well, Hay House, they have been known as kind of one of the leading publishing agencies in spiritual education throughout the years, through Louise Hay, who is the founder, and she was a profound spiritual mentor as well. And then I think a year ago, they merged with the Penguin publishing agency, which is the
Yeah.
biggest publishing agency in the world. But they still maintain their autonomy, from what I understand.
Yeah, very good. Well, that's super cool, and I am honored that we were considered before Penguin came along. But it's very cool that you were able to get published there, and that the book has reached so many people, which I know is a part of your mission with it from the beginning, is to benefit many lives, and so I'm really glad that that's happening. And congratulations! It's very impressive that you've become a #1 international bestseller. So it's clearly resonating and striking some sort of chord with people at a deep level. I have many topics for us to get into. This might be the first interview of several, but while we're here, why don't you just share a little bit about the book, the story of the book, what it's all about, what people might get out of it, or, how to, yeah.
Of course. Yeah, what I just shared with you, the children's book, is a simplified version of the message within the main book that I published, Beyond Ayahuasca. And the book Beyond Ayahuasca, it was also quite, you were the first one that I approached with the book, and it was also really meaningful to see you resonate with the book. I'm not a professional author, and it took me 18 years to write this book, and contemplating how to write it for 20 years. And the intention was never to sell it or to even publish it initially, but it was just to meaningfully relay the ancestral wisdom that I have encountered in the Amazon and the Andes, and to write it in a way that is not boring, that is not just a dry, factual, kind of prescriptive fiction account, but to really make it a living rite of passage, where people can experience these traditions from a first-person perspective. And so I wrote this book as an autobiographical adventure novel, and then the teachings are woven into the ambience of the culture, of the tradition. It's not just about some kind of dry teachings, but the book is intending to show how these ancient traditions, they're much more than just drinking some kind of a psychoactive drink, but these traditions, the cultural context of them, the flora, the fauna, the myth creations, the cosmologies of the Amazonian people in the rainforest, the ancient legends and the way of life of the people, even the food that they eat and how they are in their life, that is so essential to understand what this tradition is and how it was originally meant to be utilized, not how it has become today. And so the intention definitely was to raise awareness and to help relay these experiences in a meaningful way that bridges it with the Western mentality, because there is also a huge gap between the indigenous way of experiencing the world and our Western conceptual, logical mind that is overriding uh, a lot of the information that our organism is receiving in every moment of life.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, it's beautiful, and it's also very important. I think that one of the things that's so tricky in our day and age is that sometimes the same people, the same community and culture that's trying to change things and make a positive impact becomes a part of keeping them kind of in the same old patterns, because it's
Mm.
coming from the same conditioning and just applying that to some other context. So I think it's really important that there's material out there that's going a little bit deeper to get to the essence and to confront some of the surface level spiritual fashion and so on that's out there. So I'm glad that there's this opportunity for people to learn at a deeper level, and it's also cool that people are wanting to do that, clearly, because it's out there. So yeah, I'm very happy to
Mm.
see that. I think that's
Yeah,
what people are
it
starving for. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, no, it seems that people are ready for that at this point. There's been enough um, time where people got to experience these traditions and to play around with them, and people do want to go deeper and to experience more sustainable transformation in their daily life and not just have an exotic experience once in a
Hmm.
while.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I know you may not be like a trained full-time author or anything, but I know that you're an avid reader, because a lot of my favorite literature, when I was a teenager, I encountered through your Paititi reading list recommendations
Mm.
and conversations we had about Castaneda and all these things. So it's great. And I remember actually that we met probably almost 13 years ago now. And I remember back then that there was already this theme that there's going to be a book and you're going to work on a book and the book will happen, and there were recordings and plans to make a book. And I don't know if you remember, but I liked the idea of making a book too back then. And I just finished writing my dissertation, which will be published as a book. It's 300
Uh-huh.
pages of peer-reviewed research. So it's fun, kind of full circle to watch from. We both talked about making a book back then, and you just published, and I just finished writing. So yeah, it's very
Uh-huh.
cool.
Yeah, that's super. It's super inspiring.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's this spark to really share something meaningful, to contribute something to the evolution of the world. And so that's what kept me going throughout all of those years, is to be able to share the benefits that I received from these cultures, without which I wouldn't be alive today. I experienced a very profound healing in the Amazonian rainforest over 2 decades ago, with a condition that is considered to be incurable in the Western world, a genetic condition that I had, and often terminal eventually. And so, yeah, so all this time, it doesn't so fulfilling just to experience it myself, than to actually share those benefits with the world in a meaningful way.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit more about that backstory? I'm realizing that not everyone knows you as well as I do, so maybe we can hear the origin story of Roman Hanis and Paititi and the healing journey. Yeah.
Well, I can share a little bit. I came to the Amazon rainforest in 2001, and one of the main motivations for me at that time was this debilitating health condition that I had in my intestines, Crohn's disease. And I dealt with that condition since I was 12 years old. At a certain point, Western treatments and pharmaceuticals started making it worse than it was. And then my only option was to go through invasive medical procedures and surgeries for the rest of my life. And so then I started to explore the alternative healing modalities and also the psychosomatic sources of my condition. So I think me and you are similar in that way, because it started for me when I was about 16 years old. That's when I started to feel a lot worse. And I started to explore all of those routes and paths, and definitely read quite a bit of literature on the subject. And so then eventually that brought me to the Amazon rainforest. And when I came to the Amazon rainforest, it took about 8 months for me to go into full remission from that condition. And I've been in full remission ever since. And so this made me very grateful for the cultures,
Mm-hmm.
this kind of experience. And then when I felt that, I never intended to be a healer or a leader or a spiritual guide or a shaman or whatever people call it nowadays. But I just wanted to get to the root of my suffering, and then through that recognize how the root is connected and related with everyone in the world, and how these ancient traditions, there's a lot more to them than what meets the eye. And so, yeah, I came to these traditions not as a tourist looking for mystical, exotic shows and experiences, but I came kind of haunted by death. Um, and of course, that was my main motivation. Another one was I was very disenchanted with the life in society and in the modern world and the superficial values. And my first great love ended up marrying my best friend behind my back. So all of those things, they contributed to me coming to the Amazon rainforest in 2001. And yeah, my experience with these traditions, in order for me to heal, I couldn't just take it at face value. And I needed to relate with the indigenous elders, with the people as real human beings. And my background in Jungian and Buddhist psychology that I already had at that time helped me to bridge the intercultural gaps and start seeing how that can be directly relevant in my own life, rather than just leave it in this mystical realm of the ceremony and the ritual and the fashion show that is popular today, the new age kind of fashion show of spirituality. So yeah, so for me it was always about getting real with people, and with these traditions also, not just taking them at face value, but my elders taught me that if I am to heal, then I have to get real. And the main question that my elders taught me to ask is, what does it all even mean? And what does it mean in my life? And how can I apply that, instead of just, uh, keeping wandering in the clouds of all kinds of wonderful things that none of them really applies to my life.
Totally, totally. Yeah, well, life's the greatest teacher in that sense, and I know you have a rich life journey even beyond what you just shared, and often I ask people to go into more detail, and maybe later we will, but while we're on this topic of these ancient traditions, maybe we can stay here for a minute. So I know that you've been influenced by many global traditions, and I know that your breathwork practice that you teach is very powerful and has influenced me, and I've shared it with your permission many times, and I'm still influenced by that breathwork practice. But then I also know that you've worked deeply with Tibetan Buddhism and the Tibetan Buddhist Dharma. You also have, this real dedication to the Ando-Amazonian healing traditions. So there's a lot there, and I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit about what's the common thread, or what kind of key takeaways you feel like you would offer in a shorter setting like a podcast from these traditions, or how people can learn more about it. What draws you to them? How did they help you? And then, how can you pay that forward, I guess, would be the
Hmm.
question. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. So what I always have been drawn to were the lineages, the ancestral lineages of direct transmission of human experience. that have passed through the test of the ages. Because, yeah, of course, someone can have a realization in their own individual subjective life, and they can share it to a certain degree, but then to have these lineages where the direct human experience has been verified over time through many people's different circumstances. So I've always found that to be invaluable. And my perspective and experience with all of these ancient traditions and lineages is that no one has a copyright on true nature, Buddha nature, you can call it. But nobody has a copyright. Yeah, we can call it in different names, but the state itself is unconditional. It goes beyond our limited identities and concepts and personalities, and has to do with simply being, not trying to be something or someone, or trying to get anywhere or accomplish anything, but to just simply be. It's too simple for the complicated mind to understand. And that's why there are so many traditions and ancient lineages that help us to go beyond the superficial monkey mind and experience the indestructible nature of heart, mind, consciousness directly, without any filters. And that's what I truly honor about all of these ancient traditions that we are working with, and the indigenous people that carry them. And so our institute, you mentioned, it's a non-profit organization, so we have many different initiatives to support and empower the indigenous people in a meaningful way, where they can once again be proud of their heritage, of their wisdom and tradition. I often share it how my friends, both here in the Andes and in the Amazon, they share the challenges that they have maintaining their indigenous wisdom in today's world. And the main challenge is that in ancient times, these indigenous traditions, they were about allowing the human spirit to shine in the face of adversity. And nowadays, it's just a show for the tourists. And they themselves, they often get disempowered by that. And so a part of the work of our institute is to actually help the indigenous people remember how meaningful, how powerful their traditions are, and not just try to survive in this consumerist world today, and maintain their livelihoods and support them and their children to thrive in the world today. So this is something that our organization is very dedicated to.
Beautiful. So we'll have to do a weave and keep coming back to some of these, but I want to stay with what you're bringing up right now. I love this reflection about the direct experience, but also the transmission through the ages of this state that I'm not going to try to describe or put into words. You did as best as anyone could just now, but the true nature, right? So you're pointing towards that, and then you're also pointing out how adversity puts that to the test, and like the shining spirit of our true nature being indestructible is like, it's almost like it's shaken clean and made real by those tests of life adversity. So I just want to highlight that reflection as well. I think they're both very important. Yeah, and I want to invite you, since you came to this topic, to really share about your nonprofit, the vision. What if you had all your wildest dreams come true? What exactly would you be doing, and what impact would that have in the world? So if you could describe some of those key components, and then right afterwards, I'll ask you about the specific things you are doing right now with the ancestral school and the Yagua Nation and all of these topics. But maybe you can just start by painting the vision for us as a visionary. Yeah.
Sure. Well, what you mentioned is about putting it to the test, right? And this is something that I've learned from my elders and the experiences in these traditions, and realization that I had, and that is continuously coming back to me on deeper levels, is that the divine love is forged in the pits of hell. Otherwise, how do you know it's divine if it's not really tested against the harshest of circumstances? And the indigenous people, they have went through many trials and tribulations and lived in very harsh circumstances and environment and dealing with conquest and all of those things, and still maintaining that brilliant spirit and the connection with their essential humanity, their noble qualities, not succumbing to the sickness of the modern civilization, which is all about greed and anger and confusion and manipulation, and maintaining that and remembering throughout all this time, throughout thousands of years. So I find that to be invaluable. And so then to translate that into modern circumstances, not just to keep it, because of course it's one thing to experience it in the rainforest or in the mountains, but then how to translate it into our modern challenges, into the wear and tear of everyday life. And then we all serve a purpose within that, because the indigenous people, they maintain that essence within their own environment, but they often get lost when they come out of it. And they face all of these circumstances of the modern world that are nothing like their original environment, that they have cultivated their traditions. And so how to support them in maintaining and developing those bridges in today's world, I find that to be very essential in today's world, for the healing of the world as well, not just for the indigenous people, because these traditions, they can be so effective in the resolution of today's challenge. And so that has to do with the vision of our institute throughout the years. It's a long-term vision. You have yourself witnessed people would sometimes come to us and expect instant results and then get very disappointed and frustrated and upset and throw in the towel. But for me, it's been a long haul. It's been a path of over 2 decades, and continue to hold that prayer and vision in my heart to manifest it in a meaningful and sustainable way. Not just something that we get excited about now and we can put it on Instagram or Facebook, and then tomorrow everyone forget about it. And so that is the vision of our institute, and it's an intricate vision that weaves the inner and the outer landscapes together and honor the cultural context as well as the environment, and also the connection with the rest of the world. We live in this globalized world today. And we have our institute, we have reserve in the border, in a buffer zone of the Manu National Park, and we are at the last frontier of known civilization today. We have 1,500 hectares of private reserve that is connecting to the national government reserve, where some of the last uncontacted tribes live. And so that has been also a big responsibility for our institute to, it's not something that is very maybe popular or people pay attention to that a lot, but we've been this lighthouse making sure that there's no illegal miners and loggers and that, all kinds of different factors that can destroy the uncontacted tribes' existence. So making sure that we can raise the alarm if anything happens. And then, of course, also maintaining connections with the neighbors, with the indigenous communities in the mountains there, the Quechua people. And during COVID, this is one of the most impoverished regions in Peru, and it was hit really hard, and the roads were closed. And so during the COVID, these people, some of them were starving to death. And so our organization, we have organized our global community, and then we provided essential food supplies that lasted 6 months for about 600 families in the region. We also supported the Yagua tribe in the rainforest and the Bora tribe and also the Keros during that time, because a lot of the times nowadays, the people, they are connected with the rest of the world, and some of those tribes in the rainforest that are contacted, They are given a very small reservation, not enough to sustain themselves, and then they survive on tourism. And then no tourists coming, then no food, and then they starve to death. And so then we are seeing all of those dynamics, that how their livelihoods right now is connected with the rest of the world. And the rest of the world is often ignoring that and just seeing them as exotic tourist attractions and don't really care about them in the long run. And so then at the same time, for example, the Yagua tribe, very few people know about them. And they have one of the most, if not the most intricate cosmology systems among all the tribes. And so my book is dedicated to the Yagua tribe. They are the ones who adopted me 2 decades ago, and I've been maintaining a relationship over the years and witnessing their struggles and their challenges and their wisdom and the blessings that they themselves often take for granted and don't recognize, and because nobody else cares. And so my book is dedicated to them, and all the proceeds from the book, they go towards development of the ancestral school for the Yagua tribe children, so they can maintain their heritage and they can actually be proud of who they are and not be ashamed of that, because that also often is happening today. And our initiative also is extending. I mean, I've been writing this book for 18 years, so obviously it's more than just this, right? It's just, it was too big to be published as a one book. It's about, at this point, 3 times the size, but you know, there's more to it. So the second book is also ready to be published, and the second book is dedicated to my Ashwar elder that has passed 2 years ago. And then the initiative also is involving developing ancestral school for the Ashwar tribe, and then we will continue to support other tribes as well as the Kero Nation here in the rainforest. That is the third book, and it's also already written, but needs heavy editing. So that's part of our initiative, part of the vision to empower the indigenous people. And apart from that, in our reserve, our vision is definitely we've also been hit quite hard during COVID, and our community dispersed there. And right now, we're just starting to rise back on our feet. And the vision for the land that we have on the border between the Andes and the cloud forest um, is actually to implement that vision in a more sustainable, regenerative, larger scale, where there is permaculture initiatives together with independent carbon credit certifications that are connected to the storyline, not just the generic United Nations system that is quite faulty, but connecting it to the livelihoods, to the indigenous traditions, to the people that live there, and not just putting a fence around a reserve, how it's often the Western model, but actually empowering the people and their traditions that live there within that. And so then allowing them to continue living in symbiosis and communion with the ecology around them and have their own ecology of culture thrive alongside with that. So then creating international markets for the local farmers, the ancestral schools that I already mentioned, also e-campuses where the children in these rural native communities that are so far away, they leave their communities, they go to the city to get higher education, and they never come back. So to create e-campuses for children that wish to go that route, for them to study human rights so they can defend their communities, for them to study agroforestry engineering and implement different projects, like, you know, for their higher education, their final project, I don't know how you call it, a thesis or whatever,
If
but to
it's
actually
master's thesis or a PhD would be dissertation. Yeah.
yeah, and then specific on, you know, on the land projects that they can implement as part of their dissertation or thesis that will empower and support their own community, and then they stay there together with their people. They're not fragmented and separated from them. And so there is a lot more to that vision, and we've been preparing for that throughout many years by developing meaningful relationships with our neighbors, living side by side with them, sharing the experiences of life and supporting them, allowing them to support us, and developing that trust that allows us to move forward towards something like that. And then, of course, there's a lot more to it, but that's the basic kind of overscope.
How do you I might have said it in the introduction, but how do you sum that up in like a sentence or two if somebody needed to, if someone listened to this and they were like, "Oh my God, that's amazing." And then they go to their neighbor and they say, "Hey buddy, I just listened to Roman and Yasha and they have this vision," and then they try to tell it again, but they can't, they fumble over the words. What's like a packaged version to sum up the mission, the planetary mission, if that makes
Uh-huh.
sense? Yeah.
Well, I've been having challenges with that myself, but my intention was to actually bring together the culture, the nature, the ecology, the human society, and find the common thread within all of that that allows us to actually return to our innermost essence.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I like that. I'm glad you said that because in my work I've been using this terminology that the cause of these issues tends to be disconnection. So it's like the
mm,
disconnection from nature, from each other, from ourselves, from the universe, that's causing the disease, the warfare, the pollution, the suffering. All of these things are originating from that illusion of that all those pieces are separate instead of being part of like a whole organism, right? So then if we
mm,
can reconnect and live consciously in harmony with nature, with each other, with ourselves, with the totality, then we have this possibility for a different uh, fate, let's say. So yeah,
mm-hmm,
I it's similar, I think, to what you're saying, that holistic picture where it's all connected.
mm-hmm. Yeah, to awaken from the dream of separation, for
Yeah.
sure.
Well, and because if we don't start there from within our consciousness, which is something that in part I learned from you and also feel deeply as a lifelong insight, is like if we don't start there, then we're just putting band-aids because we're just going to
Mm-hmm,
keep having the same issues over and over again. And you can make a nonprofit and be a big philanthropist, and now you're fixing this one problem, but it's a vanity project on some level because it's
mm-hmm,
just one little symptom or manifestation of a much deeper, thousands of years old problem from one empire to the next that happens in one way or another, and then it just gets
mm,
builds up more and more. So you can try to fix it this way or band-aid that way or get rid of this dictator or whatever the thing is. But as long as we're projecting like that, we'll never get to the root of the issue. And when we go to that root, then inevitably you get these visions like our organizations and some others that are so global, because when you're from that starting point from inside, then the change is completely holistic. Every aspect of civilization's included in that, right? So
mm.
yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
really like how you described it, and that relates to the ignorance that is the cause of all suffering, and the ignorance is potentially within all of us. And I really value Jungian insight into that, how the suffering originates from the projection of our inner shadows on the outside, unresolved issues, and so then always looking for the outside cause and never seeing that actually it starts from the within, right?
Yeah.
Change
Yeah.
begins from within, something like that. So definitely I see how that is happening in the world today in many different ways, and then how can we actually change it if not through the paradigm shift and the raising of the critical mass
Mm-hmm.
consciousness. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not really, I'm very allergic to politics personally, because just even that concept itself is all about division and two sides that are against each other of the same whole. And I do believe in that critical mass consciousness is the only thing that can make a difference in the world today, and then we can bring that into our lives and then help to raise that consciousness through our own individual experiences. And so actually, if you look into human history, you can see that the greatest changes in our society and the history, they never happened through mass uprisings and protests and things like that. They happened through one or small group of individuals that, instead of fighting the existing paradigm, they actually manifested an example of what else is possible.
Yeah. Yeah, that's like that Buckminster Fuller quote, which of course we love here since we're building an eco-village design, which is, I think he said, instead of fighting the existing model, make a new alternative, better model that makes the existing one obsolete.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then I think that also resolves the political issues, because otherwise you have people over here saying, stop the old way of doing it, and then people in the old way of doing it say, you haven't shown us a better way yet. So
Mm-hmm.
if you focus on what everybody is looking to create, then you get a little more unity, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I have a few more questions I want to make sure we get through, and then we can kind of expand and relax and know that I've covered all the essentials I want to make sure we touch on.
Mm-hmm.
One of them was going to be young, but you already spoke to that, so I'm going to skip ahead to, you mentioned the Yagua Nation having some of the most intricate cosmology, even though it's a little known tribe. And I was wondering if you could give us a particular kernel, like an example of some of that cosmology, or, I know that if you're comfortable with trying to represent some example of that, it would be interesting to hear.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's woven into our children's book and also the adult book, Beyond the Ayahuasca, where the Yagua tribe, for example, they have a very detailed description of the specific stages of consciousness maturation throughout human life. And they pattern it with nature, so the different stages of how the seed sprouts and turns into a sapling and a tree. And they also parallel it with the 7 evolutionary centers. And so they speak, for example, about the 2 underworld levels, where in one of them there are those deep tremors of the tectonic plates and the earthquakes and things like that, and that relates to this very powerful unconscious forces in our lives that influence our existence. I mean, I can bridge it a lot with Jungian perspective, of course. And then they have a more superficial underground level that has to do with our personal unconscious, if I use Jungian terms, with suppressed emotions and all kinds of content and unprocessed experiences of life. And then they go through the different centers from the earth, from the birth of the seed and the sprouting through the underground. And then they have very detailed description of how human consciousness is moving in parallel to the wisdom of nature that we can see in the forest. And this is not something that I have seen. I've seen it in other tribes in a more general way. But the Yagua tribe system, actually, I find it to be very parallel, very, very similar to the Hindu system of the 7 chakras, for example. And then, of course, the Kundalini snake that is related to the ayahuasca spirit, depicted as a Kundalini moving through the evolutionary centers of our being, through the specific centers of consciousness maturation, is just very synchronistic
Yeah.
in these traditions.
Well, I'm blown away by this. I'm very glad I asked. My entire dissertation is basically proposing a more global and diverse model for how we define alchemy, because alchemy has generally been defined as this very particular strain of medieval European metallurgy, but that's not really what it is, because we know there's Chinese alchemy and there's in Hindu
Amazonian.
alchemy, and now we're talking about. And I'm so glad you mentioned it, because even like James Hillman, who was a researcher sort of in the Jungian stream with his own archetypal perspectives, gives a course on alchemy where he explains that the alchemists thought of each of these metals, from lead to gold, right, including mercury and silver and all these different metals. There's 7 of them, and they thought of each of them as a seed, and that the
Mm,
seed was growing out of the ground towards its potential, and that the light of the sun represented like the flowering of that metal to the highest
mm,
expression of metal, which was gold. So the light of the sun and the gold are like the 7th center of the what the seed's growing to. And the whole idea of alchemy was to apply heat and pressure like fire to basically take the sun and put that energy to just accelerate the inevitable evolution of that metallic seed towards its golden potential. So it's a
mm,
pretty deep study to get into the details of that, but it's very parallel to what you're describing, and can of course be correlated to human consciousness. And it's pretty much the same model. Not to oversimplify, but it's just pretty amazing. So
mm, mhm,
yeah, I'm glad you're bringing in. And I think that's one of the ways that, I mean, of course, alchemy itself is thought discounted as pseudo, whatever, by some of the mainstream, even though it's a very sophisticated. It's at the origin of modern Western science. 100%
mhm,
came out of it. But not only that, but then the fact that all of these ancient indigenous sciences are an expression of that same ancestral knowledge about these particular um, energies and operations and so on, and aspects of being, is overlooked. Like, we don't, even if we acknowledge Chinese alchemy, we completely ignore the fact that that knowledge is right there in a certain package, throughout the Americas as well. So I'm really glad I asked
mhm,
and that got that
mm,
answer. Yeah, yeah,
beautiful. That connects us to the intercultural bridges and recognizing that essential true nature is expressed in many cultures, but it's the same unconditional nature, right? It goes beyond conditions.
right, right. So one more parallel with our research, I need to review the changes you've made to the published book from the manuscript you sent me. But in the original manuscript, I remember in the introduction, you're talking about the newer findings of the big earthen glyphs and shapes that are
Mm,
now LiDAR is revealing underneath the Amazon rainforest. Like, this, I think that for people to understand, in case anybody out there is still not sure about this, there's been enough evidence now to show that the Amazon rainforest is not just an accident. It's one of
mhm,
these rare places on the world that's carefully stewarded, curated, in some sense, even created by the indigenous ancestors of that land. And not
mhm,
only do we know now for a while that the plant species there are basically like this symbiotic garden that's been tended to create that biodiversity, but beyond that, some sort of mysterious advanced science of soil building to where you get huge depth of extremely fertile black soil, like unheard of microbiome conditions in the Amazon, clearly influenced by human activity, seems to be very intentional. And now on top of that, you get these geometric structures, like the whole thing was built and designed. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit to why you included that in the introduction, and any findings about kind of
mm,
what are those mysteries beyond what we seem to normally hear about in school, that are
mhm,
going on under the surface there. Yeah.
mm. Yeah, thank you, Yasha.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's been a lot of findings since the end of the last century through the initially through the aerial shots of deforested regions in the Amazon. Ironically, that actually pointed the scientists to recognize these ancient civilizations, including the roads that traverse thousands of kilometers throughout the rainforest, and of course the LIDAR scans in different areas of the rainforest And in some areas, like in Guatemala, for example, they found huge entire cities under the canopy of the rainforest, remnants of these ancient civilizations that still defy our modern perspectives of history and human development. And then you mentioned the terra preta, ancient technology, where the rainforest is considered to be basically one of the most impoverished lands in the world, right? It's very poor soil in the Amazon, and the trees is basically just clay and sand in the Amazon basin, and there's very thin topsoil in the rainforest. And if you look at the trees in the rainforest, the roots, they don't go down, they go sideways, and they all hold each other. Right? You mentioned the symbiotic system. So usually uh, in biology, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but basically it's considered that the branches of the trees, they only grow as wide as the roots grow. But because in the rainforest all the roots are intertwined, the branches can grow much more than usually, right? So I find that fascinating, right? The power of community and how we can branch out. And so then the Terra Preta technology that was discovered is this self-replicating organic humus soil that goes deep. And nowadays, the modern science still hasn't been able to find out how that works and replicate it. So they found remnants of it. They discovered that it's viable and functional, and it was widely used, but no one can replicate with all of the advances of our modern science today. It's still a mystery how they did it. In our institute, we've done some of the work researching and replicating, and we were only partially successful. And then, of course, the moats that surrounded the entrance. At first, it was thought that it was moats to protect the cities, but now they see that they were aqueduct channels. And then precise geometrical shape of the ancient cities, and also a lot of evidence of cultivated crops and specific trees in different areas that have been intentionally planted across the rainforest. So there's so much evidence that is coming up. I think Graham Hancock did a great job creating an overview of that external experience and process of that ancient civilization. And the focus of my book has been to show the inner origin, right? So Graham Hancock shows the outer evidence of that. My book is intending to point out the inner origin of how those ancient civilizations were developing on the outside, but how it all started from within.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that as modern Western people, one of the most valuable things we could do for our species is learn to be better students. Like learn to really be curious and humble about things and like actually wonder what is it that we're missing and what might somebody know that we have to understand better, because we get into the politics of it. But what about like what if the myths are true, and what does that mean? And what if we actually just directly listen to these ancient cultures around the world and what they have to say and their stories and their teachings and their elders and so on, because they might have a lot to share that might not be part of the narrative you read online or in some sort of show or newspaper or something. But if you go directly to the source and you listen to what's being said there and you consider if it might have know something more than what we do, something even more advanced than what we already studied in school where we thought we were the most advanced ever. So I think that would be a good attitude to take on. And I don't mean to drone on about the alchemy, but because you brought up the Terra Preta technology and the mystery of it, I do want to just briefly point out that even that is another great example where I don't think the Western alchemists, I think they were awesome. I don't think that they were the first. I think they were borrowing some sort of ancient knowledge and putting it in a new model, probably came from Africa originally, but it's a mystery how old it is and why it's everywhere in the world. And the terra preta is an example of it, because all that, literally the word alchemy might relate to the word for black earth, and the prima materia, the first matter, being this human interaction with the natural environment to build this very rich soil, through these alchemical operations, probably involving like fire and heat and manure and clay and layers and pressure, all these things that are similar in that science and the evidence we're finding. So it's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I want to
Yeah,
ask, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I was gonna say that, of course, all of this is pointing us to the capacity of the human potential, right? That, and then what you mentioned in terms of the learning to listen from this culture. So we have to learn to listen, right? It's, or my elders sometimes would tell me that, yeah, a big part of this process is just taking out all the baggage, right? In Zen Buddhism, it's called the beginner's mind, right? It necessitates humility, openness, fresh perspective. Um, and that, of course, there is a process of learning. And that's what I also mean by intercultural bridges, that gap between how the indigenous people perceive reality, where for them it's not the way that we perceive it in more conceptual, fragmented, separated way. For them, their dreams, their waking life, the people, the situations, the animals, the forest, it's all part of the living energy that they're experiencing more intuitively. And for us in today's world, it's not about also reverting to the more mystical or superstitious way of life, but it's about bridging those gaps, right? And creating a middle way where we can allow ourselves to be open, to sense, to feel everything, to relate to everything as energy, but then also to bridge the mind with the heart and to bring consciousness and to be able to have the more objective perspective into it, right? So I think it's not about reverting back necessarily, but finding a middle way, because our today's consciousness that has developed, it's fairly new, right? The conceptual mind, but it's also part of our human evolution. It's not the only thing, it's not the center like we treat it today, but there has to be this meaningful bridging with the collective previous human experience and then our today's world.
Yeah, I actually think that the same attitude and misconceptions we bring to ancient technologies like medicine, we bring to modern innovations and technologies, because we bring the misconception and the projection that it's about that external thing, but the thing is just an amplifier. It's a tool, and it's going to amplify what your inner state is. So if you go to the medicine thinking this is the solution, it's going to fix me and all my problems automatically, without doing any inner work myself or having any disciplines or reflection and so on, then you won't, it might only make things even worse, right? It might actually backfire because you're misusing something and trying to shirk your responsibility. And it's the same thing, you know, of course, there may be some dangers or some caution that's important with AI and all these technologies, but there are also amplifiers like, you know, money, computers, all these things are there that are going to be, they're going to express what our own inner maturity and state of consciousness as a species. So if we start with ourselves and how we are doing, then those tools can become empowerment for one direction or the other, right?
Absolutely.
So I think we have to move forward too with that attitude and start where we are, right? Meet the reality of the current context we're in, that is global, and there's all kinds of practical considerations and so on. So yeah, I'm open to any other reflections you want to add. And I also want to start to come to a close soon. And I wanted to ask you, because I think it really ties everything together, the experience of parenthood. I think that family is one of the best ways where we start to ripple from that inner work to what change can we really make in the world. And of course, you and I want to go start nonprofits and do things in the global scale, and you're doing it. You have an international best-selling book, but I think the home is where it really happens,
Mm.
right? And the family is where the change is really happening. So I'm curious if you could share with us as a father how that's going and any reflections on the family life.
Well, I have two amazing sons. One is 8 years old and one is 5. And yeah, that's been the most powerful ceremony of my life, I can say, right? So, yep, all the ceremonies, all the spiritual inner work that I've done, it was all put to the test with my children. And yeah, it's been a profound rite of passage in my own life as well, because again, um, just children, they are such a powerful rite of passage. Where before that, even though I could be with others and support people for months or more, but then still I like to have my own space and I like my own certain comfort things. And then with children, it becomes impossible. It's like you have to be on call for 24/7. I'm no longer living for myself. And that's a powerful transformation, rite of passage, definitely, to just this next stage of maturation, right? So definitely, for me, that's been the most powerful ceremony, and really showing me all of my own blind spots and things that I was still holding on to, pretending that I'm so spiritual and all of those things. And then, yeah, my children are my greatest teachers, and they help make it real for me and hold me accountable.
Yeah.
And I
Well,
love this, just evolving together with them and being their friend and showing them that, of course, I also have my issues and I'm also learning and growing, and it's been so beautiful to engage with them in that.
yeah. I've heard one of my elders say that it's very hard to really understand sacrifice till you're a parent.
Mm.
So yeah,
Mhm.
thank you for showing that way to some of us, because somehow you managed to be a father and a best-selling author in the same year. So thanks for doing all of that, and yeah, for
I've been a
people.
father 8 years now.
Yeah. No, I know, not a new father, but for people who might think that it's impossible to do both, you're doing it right now. So that's a good
Uh-huh.
reminder.
I,
And
I'm
yeah,
juggling for sure.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I mean, again, it's like in the indigenous traditions, the children are always around. In our modern world, so many times children cannot be part of the parent's life, and it's very sad for me to see it. And so then this workshop, when um, I've already tested this workshop with the children's book at my kids' school after we implemented it in the Yagua tribe in the rainforest. And here I live in the Sacred Valley near Cusco. It's more kind of international community here, and the children loved it. And it's a special workshop that can develop more profound bonds between parents and children. The workshop introduces eco-socio-emotional intelligence and how the heart is like that seed, as you were mentioning, that needs to open to all of the elements of life, and how those elements flow through the rest of our existence. And then there are practices and the breath work that comes from the Amazon, as well as the despacho that comes from the Queros and the Andes. And it's been so beautiful to see the children reconnect with this natural wisdom in their lives and share it with adults and parents. And so I intend to uh, to share this workshop when I visit the US in October. So I'm really looking forward to it. And yeah, maybe we can do it together with our community in Colorado, because you have beautiful people there, and we also have in Paititi Institute people connecting to our work throughout the years. So it would be beautiful to share that with children throughout the world, because I know that that's where it all starts.
yeah, yeah. Great. Well, I think this is a good place to conclude. We are a family-oriented community here. We have 40 acres near Colorado Springs where we're developing the eco village. We used to call it Sanctorum, but we're entering a new era of our whole work and everything. So we're calling everything Interworld now. So it's the Interworld Eco Village, and we have
Mm.
families that live here. There's some amazing kids running around, and maybe they'll get to meet your kids if they're around someday. And yeah, we've got some people living here. We'll put in underground greenhouses this year. We just remodeled our yurt, so it's a space we could use for a workshop or go on a whole tour. There's even local high schools and places we're connected to, or maybe we could bring the workshop. So let's
Mm.
talk about it and see what happens. And people can stay tuned with interworld.org and also Paititi. Is it still dash
Mhm.
institute.org? Mm-hmm. So stay tuned and look for Beyond Ayahuasca by Roman Hanis on Amazon to keep the spreading of the book going with us and learn from it. And hopefully we can reconnect in person in October. So some episodes are a little bit longer than this, but Roman and I needed our time to catch up off camera before we started. So we're gonna call it a day here, I think, and then maybe we'll do another episode in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Yasha. And your work is very inspiring. I look forward to visiting your community, and I look forward to us co-creating the world of enlightened ancestors together.
All right. Thank you, Roman. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you, everyone. Many blessings.
Peace.